here is yet another story from Bites and Bones. From the Bones side, this one is called Eyes on Imogene by Richard Peck. It was the afternoon of February 14th, and my sister Imogene was soaking her mail. Back in those days, you sent your valentines from the post office, stamped. Girls counted how many they got. Imogene did. They also thought somebody might write a secret message of love under the stamp, so they had to go to work and soak all the stamps off to see. Imogene did. When I drifted into the kitchen, she snatched up all the soaked envelopes and ripped them into confetti. I took it there was nothing written under those stamps. She stood tapping a foot at the sink, waiting for me to go away. But I was her little brother. It was my job to pester her, and I didn't like to shirk it. No message of secret passion yet? I inquired of the big red bow on the back of her head. But there was still a small pile of envelopes unopened on the drain board. Go ahead on, I said. Peel off them other stamps. Don't mind me. After you're gone, she said to the kitchen wall. But her hand was twitching towards the last envelopes. It beat me how many valentines she got. I used to think she sent them to herself, but I wasn't sure now. She was at the high school, and anything can happen there. She was being too ladylike today to chase me outside and off the porch. Besides, she looked down and saw an envelope unlike the rest, asking to be opened. The envelope wasn't a valentine color, and it was limp and stained, like it had been soaked already. You could barely read Imogene's name and our address on it. The stamp was already gone, the postmark blurred. There was something kind of nasty about it. I personally thought it smelled funny. Something smelled funny. Imogene wanted to wipe her hands on her apron, but curiosity got the better of her. She tore at the envelope. Inside, a flimsy page unfolded, reading, "Roses are red, violets are blue. I'm outside the window, looking at you." I read that around her arm, and it gave me the creeps. She couldn't help but glance at the window. We both did. There was nothing but evening out there, and the porch. Then, at the bottom of the flimsy page, a name, very clear. Earl. Earl, I thought, and something slithered down my spine. Imogene turned on me. The paper shook in her hand. The only Earl we knew was Earl Youngblood. He dropped out of the high school better than a year ago to join the Navy. Did you send this? Imogene brandished the limp sheet in my face. Because it isn't funny, and I'll find out. Earl Youngblood had sunk on the battleship Maine when it blew up in the harbor at Havana last year around Valentine's Day. And true, they never found his complete body. For the funeral they buried an empty sailor suit and a finger bone with his class ring on it. Not funny in the slightest. Imogene's voice wobbled all over the kitchen, but she could tell by looking. I hadn't sent the thing. Imogene could always see right through me. I suspected Whip Chandler, who was more or less my best friend, though he was only in 8th grade. I happened to know he had eyes for Imogene. I'd happened to see the hair ribbon he'd stolen from her, tied on his watch fob. But what high school girl would look at a valentine from an 8th grader? Though I think Whip had repeated a grade sometime earlier. I caught up with him after school the next day. "Whip," I inquired, "did you send a verse or anything to Imogene for Valentine's?" What good would that do me? He was a big, overgrown kid. He looked like a man to me. "You sure?" He made a fist, so I guessed he was sure. I told him about the message signed Earl. Earl Youngblood. We were trudging along, but Whip slowed. "He's at the bottom of the harbor down in wherever, isn't he? That place where the war started." Either that, or sending Valentine's verses from the post office. I still suspected Whip of trying to get Imogene's attention any way he could. Snow was falling on ice. A horse was down over the cross street, so Whip and I had to help with that. When we were on our way again, I said, "Was Earl Youngblood sweet on Imogene?" Whip looked down on me. "Everybody's sweet on Imogene. You just can't see it because she's your sister." "Oh. And you're just a kid," Whip shrugged me off, kind of disgusted, and we split up and headed home. Then there was a big ruckus that same night. Mother and Dad were in the front room after supper, their feet to the stove. Imogene was up in her room. I was somewhere, hiding from chores. We had us a hired girl who cooked and washed up. Her name was Agnes, and she was real thin and nervous. When she let out that scream, you could hear it downtown. People did. There followed the sound of breaking crockery. We all pounded into the kitchen to see Agnes bent double and blubbering. Well, it was not the best set, Mother said, meaning the broken dishes. Agnes, take the apron down from your face. She was white as flour, and pointing to the window. It was horrible, she blurted. A ghastly figure in clouds of smoke. He pointed to his heart. Agnes pointed to hers. His eyes burned like hot coals, she moaned. When he seen me, he vanished. You'd think nobody'd ever looked at Agnes before, which nobody had. How tall, Agnes? I inquired, and she put her jittering hand up about Whip's height. I was sure it was Whip. In fact, I thought I'd given him the idea. The so-called smoke was from his steamy breath. It was 0 that night. Agnes had added the burning coal eyes. Dad had to put on his overshoes and bundle up to take Agnes home. She said if this kind of thing kept up, she'd quit. The next day, I caught up with Whip. Were you out last night? I inquired. No, he said. Where? On our back porch, looking in, pointing to your heart. I spent all evening at my workbench, he said, shaving shingles. You got any witnesses? I said. He made a fist, so that was good enough for me. Well, if it wasn't you, and it wasn't me, who was it? Who was who? Whip said. The ghastly figure on our back porch, who vanished when he saw it was Agnes, not Imogene. Could have been anybody from the high school. Everybody's sweet on, but who? So we decided to stake out the back porch and nab whoever it was. Whip played along in hopes of a glimpse of Imogene. I wanted to get to the bottom of this. If Agnes kept throwing crockery, we'd run out of it. Besides, the whole thing had me worried. I slipped out after supper and met Whip behind the barn. A pale moon played through bare branches. It was so cold the world squeaked, and I thought I'd lose my ears. There was no place to hide where you could and see the back porch. We were dancing to keep from freezing when we just gave up and went our separate ways home. When I nagged Whip to stand guard the night after that, he made a fist, and I took that for a no. Anyway, no ghastly figure or anybody from the high school peered into our kitchen on the nights that followed. When I asked Imogene what she'd done with the mysterious verse in the limp envelope, she said she'd stuck it in the stove. It was a hard winter. Winters were, back then, not like now. There wasn't a thaw until almost April, when Mother had us doing spring cleaning. My job was to clean off the back porch and see if it needed a coat of paint. Having no choice, I set to work one Saturday morning. Then, right there on the floor under the kitchen window where I was sweeping, I spied a long curl of something frozen in the last of the ice. It looked like slimy seaweed. I looked closer. Scattered all about were seashells, crusted with hard little grains of sparkling sand. I thought hard about it, squatting there on the porch. Where had Whip Chandler come by something like seaweed and sandy seashells, all these hundreds of miles from an ocean? In the dead of winter? Whip Chandler had never been out of town. When I couldn't figure out how he'd pulled that, I swept the seaweed and those shells loose from the ice and over the side of the porch, and I did my level best never to think about them again. Well, that was a fun one. I hope you enjoyed.